Hey guys, welcome to Yesterday's Coffee. This is the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, and business all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday. Today, we're doing something a little bit different, and we're going to be going over an article that actually just came out on a study done by the Children's Hospital in Boston detailing diets for long-term fat loss. So,
just a disclaimer. The Children's Hospital of Boston is one of the best in the country, in the world. It's amazing. So nothing bad towards them. But we wanted to bring this up because how often are you scrolling through Facebook or Instagram and you see just like a clickbaity title?
You see nutrition articles every day.
Everyone hating on coconut oil, canola oil is the best. Just all these different titles that jump out at you, and especially right now with keto being such a big buzzword. Clearly you clicked on it. Mm-hmm. I wasn't the one who found it, by the way. It was Kyle. Yeah. Kyle found it. You clicked on it because you were like, oh, what is this?
And I really wanted to talk today on this article specifically because so many of these articles that we see are so contradictory. One day it's good, the next day you see the same thing that's bad, and it's so hard to discern what is actually good information. So important parts of any study are how they are designed, how they are interpreted, and how they're reported upon. So the study that we're talking about today was done by Children's Hospital in Boston. And essentially what they did was they had 164 people go through a 30-week trial. So the first part of the trial was a 10-week weight loss phase where each individual lost anywhere between 10 to 14% of their overall body weight before being transitioned into a maintenance phase, which in this context, they're talking about a phase of trying to maintain that same rate of weight loss. And so this is what the study is really covering, is the next 20 weeks of this maintenance phase. So the maintenance phase, 20 weeks long, and the group was randomly assigned into one of three categories. So they had a low carb category for some people. Another group of people were put into a moderate carb category. And then finally, there was a high carb category. So the differences here are the low carb category consisted of 20% of overall calories coming from carbs, 20% of overall calories coming from protein, and the remaining calories coming from fats. The moderate carb diet was 40% carbs, 20% protein, the remainder coming from fats. And the high carb diet was 60% carbs, 20% protein, and the remainder coming from fats. So in addition to that, all calories were adjusted to keep the same rate of weight loss between groups. And what the researchers were attempting to compare was how many calories a low carb dieter would burn compared to a high carb dieter as well as a moderate carb dieter. So to see if there was any sort of difference in the amount of calories burned between these diets strictly by changing up the macronutrient component.
So just to summarize, this study was not actually done on the weight loss portion. The study was strictly to look at how effective certain maintenance programs are, certain diets are to maintain a weight loss.
So they're talking about, in this context, maintaining that rate of weight loss.
Yes, but this is not the same diet. These people weren't eating the same thing that they were to lose the weight initially.
Correct, and so that's one of the things that we'll touch on.
Point number one.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not even about weight loss.
So just to clarify, the low carb portion of this study is 20% carbohydrates, which in a lot of cases is still a decent amount of carbs. I mean,
it's a decent amount. I still consider it to be low carbs. I think what they did to create this study was they took the USDA guidelines, which give a range between 40 and 60% of your calories coming from carbs. So when you look at it that way, 40 would be moderate, 60 would be higher, on the higher end of what's recommended for the average person. And then 20 compared to the 40 to 60 range would be considered low. Yeah. But we know that 20 is not the lowest that it could be.
Right. Yeah, no, and I would say that it's still definitely low. But again, it's all relative to what you're actually comparing that to. So I don't have a problem with that definition as far as what we're calling low carb in the study. So that's what we started with. So their findings upon completion of this 20-week period, and I should also mention that these individuals in the study were fed strictly food that was given to them, provided by the study.
Okay, which is good because that can cause a lot of issues with research studies.
Yeah, so those variables were actually controlled, which is really good. Most studies don't go to that level. And so what they found was that the low-carb diet burned 209 to 278 more calories per day than those on the high-carb diet. And this next line is what is where things start to go off the rail. So
it sounds decent up to this point. They're like, okay, they controlled the variables. So, this sounds like a legitimate research study. It's by Boston.
Yeah.
This could be like good.
So that metric is great. You're burning around 200 to 300 more calories just by going on a lower carb diet.
Cool.
Now, they take this to mean that this difference would lead to an estimated 22-pound weight loss over the next 3 years if researchers weren't intervening to maintain weight.
Which we know not to be true because plateaus and, you know, how the body adapts. We know that realistically, if you stay on the same weight loss protocol, you will not just continue to lose and lose and lose and lose.
Exactly.
Because,
so this is where things start to get a little ugly because this is just perpetuating this idea that if I follow this, I'm going to lose this and it's going to stay that way. And this is what gets in the way of so many people sticking with a plan and making the proper adjustments because they have this idea in their head where I was losing weight last week and the week before that and now it stopped. So why am I even doing it anymore? And that's not how weight loss works.
No.
Not at all.
We talked about plateaus before. We know that they're expected. We know that they happen for a reason.
So the idea that this would last for 3 years, I mean, you might not go 3 straight weeks on the same macros and see results. So the fact that they're even trying to extrapolate this 22-pound difference in 3 years is just ridiculous.
I don't even know why they put that, like, tidbit of information in there, to be honest. Because it doesn't really mean anything in terms of the study anyway.
No, and it's totally irrelevant.
It's completely irrelevant.
You would never see that.
So somebody just decided to calculate this and extrapolate it, and they decided to throw it in the research.
It's not a real world effect.
No.
They go on to say that the effect was even larger for those that produced high levels of insulin in response to carbohydrates, and that group burned between 300 and almost 500 more calories per day on the low-carb diet than they did on the high-carb diet.
So now we're all of a sudden throwing in random variables like insulin sensitivity, which does matter, and it can, you know, the way that your body processes carbohydrates and you know, produces insulin can affect what type of diet will work best for you. But that's not really what the study was about. Right. So again, this is just another random thing that they threw in there to say, let's test everyone's insulin sensitivity.
Well, and to my knowledge, each individual only went through one of the categories. So each individual was either a low-carb diet or a moderate carb diet or a high-carb dieter.
Yes.
Unless I have this wrong, which I don't think I do, what they were doing was they were taking people that were roughly the same weight and comparing their results from a person that was in the low-carb diet to a person that was in the high-carb diet.
Yes.
So this wasn't actually looking at this individual tried the low-carb diet and then they tried the high-carb diet and they found that they were burning more calories on the low-carb diet. These are two different people and they're in two different categories. And because they're relatively similar weights and this one did better, we're going to assume that this guy also did better.
Yeah,
It's the correlation equals causation, and that's not how science works.
Well, but the other thing, too, is the fact that they're going to mention insulin response, but they're not going to mention in the study the fact that consuming a lower carb diet makes you more insulin sensitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So by the action of the diet itself, by eating less carbs, your body becomes more sensitive to the insulin response. So I don't know if they were trying to say that everyone in the low carb group was more insulin sensitive, or they were just picking out the most insulin sensitive people in the low carb group. Again, they don't really tell you. It's not very specific.
Well, I think it was randomly assigned. So they
randomly assigned to test insulin sensitivity?
No, so they tested for baseline insulin sensitivity. And then the population was randomly assigned to the groups. So again, it's that same extrapolation. So if they saw somebody that in the low carb group had high levels of insulin secretion, and that same type of person was in the high carb group, or low carb, whatever I just said, they were comparing those two and basically saying if one is better, then both would be better in that group.
So they were taking single people? They weren't just generalizing it group by group?
Yes.
Okay. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought they were just generalizing insulin sensitivity in low carb versus high carb.
No, it was each one was individually measured.
But they matched individual people together as comparisons.
Right. They compared them across groups without actually comparing intra-person.
Yeah. So again, if me and Kyle weighed the same amount, they're trying to say that if I ate a low-carb diet and was more insulin sensitive, I would lose more weight.
Yeah, so they're assuming that if you take the parameters of weight and insulin sensitivity being relatively the same, that you're going to have the exact same response on a diet.
Which your body weight can be predictive of insulin sensitivity to a certain point, but there are so many other factors that go into it.
Well, and so I don't have an issue necessarily with that assumption, because
I get it.
It makes sense, but again, that's a completely uncontrolled variable there.
Yeah,
so you
but
can't
you also
say that it does.
Yeah, you can't just compare one person to another, because we know that every single person is so different that even if me and Kyle are eating the same exact diet, both of us are going to respond differently.
Well, yeah, people
much less
respond
both of us
to the
eating
same
different
carbs.
Diets. Obviously, we're going to respond differently.
Yeah.
So
just something to take into account there.
Yeah.
Now, this is where it gets really entertaining.
This is my favorite part.
So the researchers encouraged all participants to maintain their usual level of physical activity, which was monitored. During the study, the low-carb group, mind you, this is the group that tended to burn more calories than the other groups, showed a tendency toward more moderate to vigorous physical activity.
So they worked out more, or they worked out harder.
So they were working out harder, potentially more. They didn't really go into too much detail. And so let me just read this full line. The low-carb group showed a tendency toward more moderate to vigorous physical activity, perhaps as a result of the diet. Then it goes on to quote the one of the authors of the study, where he emphasizes that the exercise was only a minor component of the total effect on calories burned. So what's wrong with that statement?
It's just so outrageous. I don't understand. For one, okay, you're doing a study in which you're measuring calories burned, but you're going to say that calories burned by exercise aren't important.
Right.
So you're going to monitor people's exercise, but you're not going to control it. So they can do whatever type of exercise.
Not a controlled variable at all.
Which we know, if you do strength training versus cardio versus, low intensity cardio, high intensity, everything is going to have a different calorie burn associated, and everything is going to have a different metabolic effect in terms of how long you burn calories afterward.
Right.
So how in the world are you going to say that exercise calories don't matter?
And what's great about this is the fact that the ranges that they're talking about, that one group burned more than the other, are well within the realm of the amount of calories you burn from exercise.
Yes.
So that 200
it's not like they were burning
300,
thousands of calories different.
Right.
I mean, yeah, you're going to burn an average of a couple hundred calories for a workout. Now, the other thing it doesn't tell us is how long they're working out for. If you only did a 15-minute workout, then maybe you're burning 100 calories.
Right.
So the effect would be less on your total calories for the day. But again, they completely just underreported the whole exercise variable, which doesn't make any sense when we know that exercise is basically the biggest, how do I want to say that? Like non-basic way that your body burns calories.
Yeah. Aside from the survival that's going on for your body to function, exercise is that largest piece of energy expenditure. And so
it's typically more than even just like normal daily activity. So it matters a whole lot more than just about anything else.
Yeah, well, and because they're trying to look at metabolic rate with this too. So if you've got, and so this is where it gets super contradictory, because we know that if you are doing moderate to vigorous physical activity, your metabolic rate is increased for 24 to 48 hours post-exercise.
Yeah.
So if you've got a group that is consistently doing that type of exercise, which we know increases metabolic rate, which increases calories burned, and they are doing more of that than any of these other groups, it doesn't surprise me at all that they're burning more calories, whether or not the diet has any influence on that.
So my other question is,
did they screw this up? Yeah.
I mean, they definitely screwed this up, but did they take any other body measures? So I know you said that they all were in the same like relative BMI. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So they all came from the same, relative BMI, but we know that BMI from person to person doesn't tell us anything about your bone mass, your muscle mass, your fat mass individually.
Sure. Yeah, but these were not muscular athletic population.
But however, some people could have more muscle mass than another person.
Sure, yeah.
So unless they controlled it exactly down to the, the very finite point, that's another thing to keep in mind. Again, we're just kind of exploring what makes a good research study and what makes a good,
Yeah, BMI is not the best thing to account for. However, in that population, that high of a BMI is going to give you a pretty consistent population.
Well, didn't you say 25?
Over 25.
Oh, so just all over 25.
But this is a non-athletic population.
Well, there are so many other variables.
Right.
I thought they were all 25. Right. I thought that's what you said.
No, well, so
somebody could have been 26 and somebody could have been 46, is what you're saying.
But they also cross-referenced average weight across the categories.
Yeah, but again, that doesn't really...
Yeah, so there's
a lot of things,
there.
And there's a lot of questions I have for these authors.
I could be wrong on that because I don't recall the specifics of how that was sorted. Maybe it was better than I'm thinking, but... even if we give them the benefit of the doubt on that.
Yeah. Okay, so to summarize, when trying to figure out if a research study is valid or, has enough meaning for you to really take it to heart, you have to take a look at these different things and see if the variables that they've controlled even make sense. So in this case, obviously, not controlling exercise, which is a major component of calorie expenditure.
They're just trying to act like it's an afterthought. Like, just don't...
Like, it doesn't matter
It's not
at all.
that significant.
Unless there are parts to the study that they didn't report, in which case it could just be the way they wrote the study. They did a poor job writing. I don't know. But anyway, so kind of going back then to the clickbait.
Yes.
To the actual review articles, okay? So whenever you see these articles pop up, you always want to reference the original research study, which, like we just jumped into, may not make a huge difference in terms of if it's valid or not.
Right.
But the reviews are typically by people... it depends on where you get the review,
yeah, it depends
obviously.
On the source.
Definitely depends on the source. But a lot of just the clickbaity ones you find on Facebook are by people who probably didn't even read the whole research study or don't know a lot about the topic and probably shouldn't be writing a review on a research study.
Yeah.
But where did you find this?
So the first place I even saw this story was actually on Bro Bible. Don't ask me why this even popped up in my feed, but there's a quote from them talking about the study, saying the study found that not all calories are created equal and that a low-carb diet, such as keto, was a great way to lose weight and keep it off. Now, there's a major problem with this because the ketogenic diet has nothing to do with this study. So this is an example of somebody seeing the term low carb, which if you actually go to the study definition of low carb is 20% carbohydrates, which is way higher than a ketogenic diet would ever be. Mm-hmm. And then extrapolating that to mean it includes keto.
And
so
keto is its own thing completely separately.
Yeah. So while it's not completely off base to make that extrapolation, that as you continue further down the path of dropping your carbs, that this effect continues to continue. There was no point in the study where those levels were even tested. So to bring up the ketogenic diet as a reference point to the study is just completely incorrect.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also goes to show how important it is when reading research studies to read the definitions that they give.
Yeah, you have to look at what they're saying because these definitions are.
The research study defined low carb as being 20% calories coming from carbohydrates. Whereas the people on Bro Bible or, your typical bros who work out at the gym or even, people in the bodybuilding community who are used to manipulating carbs a little bit more, they might consider a low carb diet to be what, like sub 50 grams?
Oh, yeah.
Like what would you consider to be low carb?
Yeah, I mean, I would say most people that I've worked with on a ketogenic diet, we keep carbs under 30.
Well, ketogenic, but again, keto doesn't mean low carb.
Right.
Well, keto means low carb, but low carb doesn't mean keto.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. No, I would say that 20% is fairly low carb, but again, it's all about like what in what context
definition. Exactly. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, the people from Bro Bible may have reviewed this research study and just didn't read the fine print and just read low carb diet. And in their mind, they think low carb means sub 50 or sub 30, which means keto.
Or they just think low carb means keto. Which it doesn't.
Yeah, true. But I'm just trying to think like in terms of them, the population of the people who write for Bro Bible, right? So you have to read the definitions because in another study, they could consider, like we've read research studies where they consider low carb to be 40% coming from carbs.
So it's all
So you
different.
have to read the definition in the research study, but you also need to double check your sources.
Yeah, the working definition for any of these things in any study is going to be different.
Yeah.
It's however the author chooses to define the variable. So low carb is not the same definition study to study. And that is what's really, really important because at the end of the day, most of the news places or blogs or whatever reporting on these things don't necessarily specify what those specifics are.
Exactly.
So that is really a lot of things to look out for as you go through the day looking at these articles that pop up in regards to anything nutrition related, diet related, because you'll see them plenty, and just know that you can't
in my
take
Facebook
this
feed every day.
Yeah. So you can't take it at face value.
So if you're scrolling, before you store it in your memory bank, okay, before you remember that, or you go to talk to your friends about it, or you say, oh, I saw this article scrolling through Facebook and it said, keto, blah, blah, blah. Before you even store that in your memory, click the link. Actually, look at the source to see if it's worth your time to actually read the review of the article. Mm-hmm. So we need to look for reputable sources, which, like I said, are experts in their field. It could be a dietitian. It could be a doctor. It could be a professional bodybuilder who has years of experience. So just kind of doing a little bit of a check maybe on the About page to see who's actually, behind the site, who writes for the site.
Yeah.
To see if reading the article is worth your time, for one.
Always a good idea.
If it is, just read with caution, but always compare that review to the actual article itself. So even if you don't want to spend the time combing through an actual research article, you can just read the abstract. You can read the review or the conclusion. And just get those key pieces of information. If it's something that really matters a lot to you, to your personal goals or to your, personal health conditions, I would try and comb through it if it's that important, if you really want the information that badly.
Because unfortunately, sometimes abstracts don't even tell the whole story.
No, they don't, but...
I mean, it's definitely better than just trusting
the review.
The
because I've read a lot of reviews and compared them to articles, and they're completely different. Like the reviewer took one sentence out of the entire research study and wrote an entire separate article about it. So you just want to see if the information on both matches, and then if you really care that much, you can, take some of our tips for looking at actual research studies and dig in and see if it's worth it. Or you could maybe consult your coach. Yeah. Your trainer or your coach that might be able to help you.
That's a good idea.
You could ask us.
Absolutely.
If there are any other articles that you'd like us to review or weird clickbaity things online, let us know and maybe we can make a compilation.
Yeah, no, we plan to do more of this stuff because there's never any shortage of these pieces of information floating around the internet.
They're everywhere.
So we'll have plenty more commentary as more stuff comes out. So thank you guys for tuning in today. If there's anything you'd like us to cover in the future, feel free to reach out. You can find me at HypertroFit.com, Alexis at therootedrd.com, and we will see you guys again next week.
Yep, we'll see you guys next week.